Pain is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the life of a believer, especially when that pain is inflicted by people. Many assume that because God is love, every painful encounter is an attack to be rebuked or a season to escape from. But there is a deeper intelligence behind certain wounds. Not every hurt is designed to destroy you. Some are permitted to educate you. When people hurt you, the first temptation is to personalize the pain, to see it only through the lens of emotion, offense, or betrayal. But wisdom invites you to step back and ask what this experience is revealing, not just about them, but about you, your expectations, your discernment, and your spiritual positioning. Pain has a voice, and if you silence it too quickly with anger or denial, you may miss what it is trying to teach you. There are patterns that God allows pain to expose. Sometimes the pain reveals misplaced trust, where loyalty was given without discernment. Sometimes it reveals emotional dependency, where a person was carrying a weight they were never designed to carry in your life. Other times, pain uncovers pride, where correction was resisted until it arrived through hurt. Discernment is the ability to read beyond actions and words and perceive spiritual realities, and pain often sharpens that ability when you allow it to. When someone hurts you, your response determines whether the pain becomes poison or wisdom. If you react only emotionally, pain will breed bitterness, suspicion, and inner wounds that outlive the situation itself. But when you submit the pain to God, it becomes a lens. You begin to see human nature more clearly. You learn that not everyone who smiles with you has the capacity to stand with you. You learn that good intentions do not always translate to good outcomes. You learn that people operate from their level of healing, maturity, and revelation, and sometimes the hurt they release is a reflection of what is broken within them. Spiritual discernment does not mean becoming cold or withdrawn. It means becoming accurate. It teaches you how to love without being naive, how to give without losing yourself, and how to stay open without being careless. Pain trains you to separate access from assignment. Just because someone is part of your environment does not mean they are part of your destiny. Some people are lessons, not lifetimes, and pain often marks the end of a season that familiarity tried to prolong. There is also discernment about timing that pain introduces. You begin to understand when to speak and when silence is wisdom. You learn when confrontation will heal and when it will only escalate. You learn the difference between fighting for justice and fighting for ego. Pain refines your spiritual senses so you can recognize manipulation, dishonor, and emotional imbalance early before they mature into deep wounds. Handling people who hurt you requires the grace to see beyond the offense and the courage to adjust your posture. Discernment does not excuse wrong behavior, but it prevents you from responding wrongly. It keeps you from making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. It helps you avoid projecting one person's offense onto innocent people in the future. Many relationships fail not because of the initial hurt, but because of unresolved pain that distorts perception. When pain is processed with God, it produces wisdom. You become more intentional with your trust, more prayerful with your connections, and more led by peace than pressure. You stop explaining yourself excessively to people who have already decided to misunderstand you. You stop chasing closure from those who lack the capacity to give it. You begin to value inner peace over external validation. This level of discernment also teaches you humility. You realize that sometimes you have hurt others unknowingly, and just as you desire mercy, others are also navigating their own brokenness. This awareness does not weaken your boundaries. It purifies your heart. You learn to walk away without hatred, to disengage without gossip, and to heal without revenge. Pain, when rightly interpreted, becomes a spiritual compass. It redirects you, realigns you, and protects you from future harm. It teaches you to depend more on God's wisdom than on human promises. It trains your spirit to listen closely, to observe carefully, and to respond thoughtfully, so that every hurt does not leave you wounded, but wiser, stronger, and more discerning in the way you handle people, relationships, and the journey ahead, where discernment continues to grow as your heart remains soft, but your eyes remain open. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful commands in the believer's life. Yet it is also one of the most abused concepts when it is misunderstood. Many people think forgiveness means pretending nothing happened, tolerating repeated harm, or remaining in spaces where their dignity and peace are continually violated. That confusion has caused sincere people to remain wounded while believing they are obeying God. True forgiveness is not denial of pain. It is the release of bitterness. It deals with the condition of your heart, not the continuation of unhealthy access. Forgiveness is first a spiritual decision before it ever becomes an emotional experience. You forgive because God commands it, not because the offender deserves it, or because the pain has fully subsided. Forgiveness breaks the legal hold that offense tries to establish over your spirit. When you refuse to forgive, you give the offender control over your emotional and spiritual state, even in their absence. But forgiveness does not mean the restoration of trust. Trust is built by consistency, accountability, and proven change, and forgiveness should never be used to override wisdom. There is a difference between releasing someone from debt and reinstating them into influence. You can forgive someone fully and still decide that they no longer have the right to speak into your life, handle your emotions, or walk closely with you. God never asks you to sacrifice discernment on the altar of love. Even Jesus forgave freely. Yet the Bible says he did not commit himself to certain people because he knew what was in them. That is a powerful revelation for anyone struggling with guilt for setting boundaries. Repeated abuse often continues because forgiveness is practiced without structure. When someone realizes there are no consequences for their actions, no accountability, and no change required, their behavior is reinforced. Forgiveness without boundaries teaches people how to keep hurting you. Wisdom introduces limits, not to punish, but to protect. Boundaries are not walls of hatred. They are fences of honor. They define what is acceptable and what is not, and they help both parties understand the cost of access. Forgiving someone does not obligate you to keep explaining your pain to a person who has already decided not to change. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow distance to speak where words have failed. Silence, in some seasons, is not bitterness. It is maturity. You stop arguing with people who are committed to misunderstanding you, and you stop bleeding emotionally in spaces where there is no empathy. Mastering forgiveness also means forgiving without self-betrayal. God never intended forgiveness to come at the expense of your mental health, emotional stability, or spiritual growth. You must learn to forgive while still honoring the signals pain has given you. Pain often highlights where adjustments are needed. Ignoring those signals in the name of spirituality can lead to cycles of trauma disguised as loyalty. There is also the temptation to use forgiveness as a spiritual badge, where pain is minimized publicly but carried privately. That hidden bitterness eventually manifests as anger, withdrawal, or emotional numbness. True forgiveness is honest. It acknowledges the depth of the wound, while choosing not to let the wound define the future. It allows God to heal what people damaged without demanding apologies that may never come. When forgiveness is healthy, it brings freedom, not confusion. You no longer feel responsible for fixing people who refuse to change. You stop confusing compassion with responsibility. You learn that loving someone does not require you to rescue them from the consequences of their actions. Growth requires discomfort, and sometimes God allows distance so that both parties can confront truth. Forgiveness becomes powerful when it is paired with self-respect. You forgive because you value your peace, not because you are afraid of being seen as unspiritual. You forgive while choosing environments that align with honor, safety, and growth. You forgive while redefining access levels, understanding that not everyone deserves the same proximity to your heart. In this maturity, forgiveness becomes a shield rather than a wound. You walk lighter, not bitter. You remain kind, but no longer careless. You remain open, but no longer exposed. You allow God to deal with people justly, without carrying the burden of revenge or resentment. Your heart stays clean, your spirit stays free, and your life moves forward without being trapped in cycles of pain. Disguised as grace, boundaries are one of the clearest expressions of wisdom in relationships. Yet they are often misunderstood as signs of pride, unforgiveness, or lack of love. In truth, boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about defining how close they are allowed to come. A boundary is a line drawn by discernment, not by anger. When people hurt you, God does not always call you to endure silently. Sometimes He calls you to adjust access. Maintaining a godly heart does not require tolerating dishonor or emotional harm. Many believers struggle with boundaries because they confuse love with unlimited availability. They feel guilty when they say no, step back, or change relational patterns, especially when the person involved has history with them. But history does not justify harm. Familiarity does not excuse disrespect. Boundaries help you honor yourself without hating others. They allow you to stay compassionate without being consumed. A pure heart is not a heart that feels nothing. It is a heart that refuses to store offense. Boundaries protect that purity. Without boundaries, resentment quietly builds, even in the most spiritual people. You smile outwardly while bleeding inwardly, and over time, that hidden pain hardens the heart. Godly boundaries prevent bitterness by addressing issues before they become wounds. They give structure to relationships so love can function without distortion. Setting boundaries requires courage because it often invites misunderstanding. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or acting superior. But growth always looks like offense to those who were comfortable with your previous limits. You must decide whether your goal is to be liked or to be whole. Peace is too expensive to be exchanged for approval. Boundaries are not ultimatums, they are guidelines. They communicate what behavior is acceptable and what consequences follow when lines are crossed. This is not about control but clarity. Healthy people respect boundaries even when they don't like them. Unhealthy people challenge boundaries because they reveal a loss of access. How someone responds to your boundaries often reveals more about their intentions than their words ever did. A godly heart does not retaliate when boundaries are violated. It responds with consistency. You do not argue endlessly, over-explain, or beg for understanding. You state your position with calmness and follow through with action. Repeated explanations often signal internal doubt. Confidence rooted in peace does not need constant defense. When boundaries are ignored, distance becomes a form of communication. Jesus demonstrated this balance perfectly. He loved deeply, yet he withdrew often. He served many, yet he entrusted his heart to few. He forgave freely, yet he confronted dishonor directly. This reveals that spiritual maturity is not measured by how much you endure, but by how wisely you steward your heart. Access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Maintaining a pure heart while enforcing boundaries means checking your motives continually. Boundaries built out of fear isolate, but boundaries built out of wisdom protect. You must guard against allowing pain to turn boundaries into walls. Walls shut everyone out. Boundaries allow the right people in. This requires healing prayer and self-awareness so that past hurt does not dictate future connections. There is also a seasonality to boundaries. Some boundaries are permanent, others are temporary. Discernment helps you know which is which. Not every relationship needs to end, but some need to be redefined. Adjusting access does not mean abandoning love. It means changing proximity. You can love someone from a distance without hatred or resentment. When boundaries are established with a pure heart, they bring peace, clarity, and emotional stability. You no longer feel drained after interactions that once exhausted you. You stop replaying conversations in your mind, wishing you had spoken up. You begin to experience freedom in relationships where love is mutual, respect is present, and communication is honest. A godly boundary also teaches others how to treat you. It sets a standard for honor and respect. Those who value the relationship will adjust. Those who refuse to adjust reveal that they valued access more than connection. This clarity saves you from prolonged confusion and emotional turmoil. In learning to set boundaries, you discover that love and limits are not opposites, they are partners. Love without limits leads to burnout, but limits without love lead to isolation. Godly wisdom brings both together, allowing you to walk in peace, strength, and emotional health while keeping your heart soft, your spirit guarded, and your relationships aligned with purpose and truth. One of the greatest tests of maturity is not what you feel when people hurt you, but how you choose to respond. Emotional reactions are natural, but they are not always wise. When pain strikes, the human instinct is to defend, explain, retaliate, or withdraw, often within moments of the offense. Yet wisdom teaches restraint. It creates space between what happens to you and what comes out of you. That space is where authority is preserved and damage is prevented. Emotions are powerful indicators, but they are poor decision makers. If you allow emotions to lead, they will often push you to say what should have been prayed about, to confront what should have been processed, or to react in ways that feel relieving in the moment but costly in the long term. Wisdom invites you to pause. Silence, when chosen intentionally, is not weakness, it is control. It prevents temporary feelings from producing permanent consequences. Responding with wisdom means understanding that not every offense deserves a response. Some issues lose their power when they are not given attention. Addressing everything emotionally drains your energy and diminishes your focus. Discernment helps you identify which battles are necessary and which ones are distractions. Many conflicts escalate not because of the original issue, but because emotions were allowed to dictate tone, timing, and words. Timing is a crucial element of wisdom. Even the right words spoken at the wrong time can cause unnecessary damage. When emotions are high, understanding is low. Wisdom waits for clarity. It chooses moments where communication can be received rather than resisted. This patience protects relationships from unnecessary fractures and protects you from being misunderstood. There is also wisdom in choosing your language carefully. Emotional reactions often exaggerate, accuse, and generalize. Words like always and never surface quickly when emotions are unchecked. Wisdom speaks with precision. It addresses specific behaviors rather than attacking character. It seeks resolution, not domination. This kind of response disarms hostility and creates room for accountability without humiliation. Responding wisely also means recognizing when engagement is unsafe. Some people are not seeking understanding, they are seeking control, validation, or conflict. In such cases, emotional reactions feed the very behavior that caused the hurt. Wisdom disengages without drama. It refuses to argue with manipulation. It understands that access to your emotions is a form of power, and not everyone should be trusted with it. Self-mastery is at the core of wisdom. When you can feel deeply and still respond calmly, you demonstrate strength. This does not mean suppressing emotions, but governing them. You acknowledge the hurt privately, process it honestly, and then choose a response that aligns with your values rather than your impulses. This level of control protects your dignity even in moments of injustice. Many people regret not what was done to them, but what they did in response. Emotional reactions can damage credibility, relationships, and witness. Wisdom guards your reputation. It allows you to leave situations without regret, knowing that even if you were wronged, you did not become wrong in your response. Wisdom also teaches you to seek counsel before responding to deep hurt. Isolation magnifies emotion, but godly counsel brings perspective. When you submit your feelings to trusted voices, you gain clarity. You begin to see angles you missed and motives you misunderstood. This does not invalidate your pain, it refines your response. There are moments when confrontation is necessary, and wisdom does not avoid it. But wise confrontation is calm, direct, and purposeful. It is not fueled by the need to win or to vent, but by the desire for truth and growth. When confrontation flows from wisdom, it carries authority without aggression and firmness without cruelty. Learning to respond with wisdom instead of emotion is a process. It develops through intentional practice, prayer, and self-awareness. Each time you choose restraint over reaction, you strengthen your inner discipline. Each time you choose peace over pride, you mature. Over time, people begin to recognize that they cannot easily provoke you. Your stability becomes a boundary. Your calm becomes a language. You no longer need to explain yourself excessively or defend your character loudly. Wisdom speaks through consistency, composure, and restraint, allowing you to navigate hurtful situations with clarity, strength, and grace, while keeping your spirit anchored, your words measured, and your actions aligned with purpose rather than pain. Healing is not the same as forgetting, and strength is not the same as hardness. Many people respond to hurt by building emotional armor, convincing themselves that closing their heart is the safest way to survive. Over time, they become guarded, distant, and suspicious, believing this is wisdom, when in reality it is fear disguised as maturity. God's intention is never to heal you by hardening you. He heals you by restoring sensitivity without vulnerability to harm. When people hurt you, there is a temptation to withdraw completely, to stop trusting, to stop opening up, and to stop believing that healthy relationships are possible. This response feels protective, but it quietly shrinks your emotional and spiritual capacity. A hardened heart may feel safe, but it cannot love deeply, receive freely, or grow fully. Healing, on the other hand, allows you to remain open while being discerning. Allowing God to heal you requires honesty. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Many believers rush past pain with spiritual language, saying they are fine while their emotions tell a different story. Suppressed pain does not disappear. It transforms into irritability, numbness, or exhaustion. God invites you to bring the rawness, the disappointment, and the confusion to Him without editing it. Healing begins when you stop pretending you were not hurt. God's healing process often involves time, not just prayer. Time allows emotions to settle and truth to surface. In the waiting, God gently separates what happened from who you are. Hurt has a way of attaching itself to identity if it is not addressed. You begin to see yourself through the lens of rejection, betrayal, or disappointment. Healing restores your true identity, reminding you that what happened to you is not who you are. One of the dangers of unresolved pain is that it reshapes your expectations. You begin to anticipate harm, even in safe environments. Compliments feel suspicious. Kindness feels temporary. This is how pain hardens the heart quietly. God heals by retraining your perception. He teaches you to evaluate people individually rather than through the filter of past wounds. This keeps you from punishing innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Healing also involves releasing the need to become emotionally untouchable. Many people pride themselves on not needing anyone, but independence born from pain is not strength. It is survival. God created you for connection, not isolation. Healing allows you to need people again without becoming dependent on them. It restores balance, where you can receive support without losing stability. A softened heart does not mean you are easily wounded. It means you are deeply rooted. When God heals you, He strengthens your inner life so that external actions no longer define your worth. Offense loses its power when your identity is secure. You no longer need constant reassurance, and you no longer crumble at disappointment. This is not because you feel less, but because you are anchored more deeply. God's healing often requires forgiveness of yourself as well. Many people replay situations, blaming themselves for not seeing the signs earlier or for trusting too quickly. Self-blame hardens the heart against grace. Healing teaches you to extend compassion inward, recognizing that you did the best you could with the understanding you had at the time. This self-kindness softens the soul and restores confidence. Another aspect of healing is learning to feel without reacting. Hardened hearts feel less to avoid pain, But healed hearts feel fully and respond wisely. You allow sadness without despair, anger without aggression, and disappointment without bitterness. Emotional regulation is a fruit of healing. You are no longer controlled by feelings, yet you are not disconnected from them. God also heals by renewing hope. Hurt convinces you that what failed once will fail again. Healing reopens your expectation for good without naivety. You begin to believe that healthy relationships exist, that respect is possible, and that joy can return. This hope does not make you callous, it makes you courageous. Remaining soft in a world that wounds you requires divine strength. God does not ask you to heal yourself, He invites you to cooperate with His process. As He heals, you become kinder without being weaker, wiser without being cynical, and loving without being careless. Your heart stays tender, your discernment stays sharp, and your spirit remains free to grow, connect, and move forward without being defined by past pain or limited by fear masquerading as protection. Maturity is revealed not by how loudly you defend yourself, but by how intentionally you choose your direction after being hurt. Many people allow offense to become a steering wheel, shaping their decisions, relationships, and emotional posture. When pain is not managed, it begins to dictate reactions, narrowing vision and pulling focus away from purpose. Growth requires the discipline to acknowledge the hurt without allowing it to become the center of your life. Choosing purpose over offense means recognizing that not every injustice deserves your energy. Some battles are distractions designed to drain you emotionally and delay you spiritually. Offense demands attention, explanation, and retaliation, while purpose demands focus, patience, and consistency. When you prioritize offense, you begin to live in reaction mode. When you prioritize purpose, you regain control of your trajectory. People who hurt you often expect a certain response. They anticipate anger, withdrawal, or confrontation. When you refuse to give them that power, you disrupt the cycle. Maturity understands that you do not need to correct every misconception or respond to every provocation. Your life speaks louder than your explanations. Progress becomes your response, and consistency becomes your defense. Offense has a way of shrinking your world. It limits your willingness to trust, collaborate, and engage. Purpose expands your perspective. It reminds you that your life is bigger than a single moment of pain. When you keep purpose in view, you stop replaying conversations in your mind and start investing energy into growth. You become more intentional with your time, your relationships, and your emotional resources. There is also a temptation to use offense as justification for stagnation. People say they are cautious, but in reality, they are afraid to move forward. Maturity calls this out. It challenges you to grow despite the hurt. Not after everything feels resolved. Waiting for perfect emotional closure can keep you stuck indefinitely. Purpose invites movement even when feelings are still catching up. Choosing purpose over offense does not mean suppressing pain. It means refusing to let pain become your identity. You process the hurt privately, prayerfully, and honestly, but you do not make it your public narrative. When pain becomes your story, it attracts sympathy but limits transformation. When purpose becomes your story, it attracts growth and alignment. Maturity also understands that offense often reveals areas where growth is needed. Sometimes what hurts most is what touches insecurity, pride, or unhealed places. Instead of defending those areas, purpose-driven maturity examines them. This self-awareness accelerates growth. You stop seeing offense only as something done to you, and start seeing it as information that can refine you. There is strength in choosing not to retaliate. Retaliation ties you emotionally to the offender, keeping them involved in your inner life. Maturity releases that tie. You stop rehearsing arguments that never happen and stop imagining outcomes that never come. Emotional energy is redirected toward vision, discipline, and improvement. Purpose also helps you reframe loss. When relationships end through hurt, it is easy to see only what was taken. Maturity looks for what was gained. Clarity, discernment, and direction often emerge from painful separations. Purpose helps you see endings as transitions rather than failures. You begin to understand that some connections expire not because you are unlovable, but because you are evolving. Growing in maturity means accepting that being misunderstood is sometimes the cost of staying aligned with purpose. Explaining yourself endlessly can become a distraction. Purpose-driven people accept that not everyone will understand their choices, boundaries, or silence. They find security in alignment rather than approval. As maturity deepens, emotional reactions lose their urgency. You become less easily offended, not because people behave better, but because your sense of identity and direction is stronger. You are no longer easily pulled into unnecessary conflict. Your priorities become clearer. You choose peace over proving a point, progress over punishment, and growth over grievance. This maturity produces stability. People may still hurt you, but they no longer derail you. You continue showing up, building, and becoming. Offense becomes a moment, not a mindset. Purpose becomes the anchor that keeps you moving forward, refining your character, strengthening your resolve, and aligning your life with long-term impact rather than short-term emotional relief.